All right, I will call this meeting to order. Please rise for pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Here.
Mr. Lunder, Mrs. Thompson, here. Mrs. Moore, here. Mr. Shaboo,
Here.
Mr. Morris,
Here.
Mr. Johnson,
Here. Approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of council on August 9th, 2022. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So made.
By Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson, stay. Mrs. Moore, aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Correspondence. Clerk, do we have any correspondence tonight?
I have no correspondence tonight.
Does any member of council have correspondence tonight? Yes.
Aye.
Desiree, good afternoon. As my ward council person, I want to let you know that I support the senior apartment facility at the former boat repair storage business location. While I haven't viewed conceptual drawings yet, I think it would be good to get this property back into play. And any type of commercial or retail establishment is unlikely to go forward at that corner. As you are aware, I am very familiar with the community and economic development within Lake County. The idea of developing this area into a retail corner with stores and or a restaurant, while admirable, are very unlikely. We, men on the lake, already have a difficult time filling our current retail buildings in a commercial corridor. I believe the senior apartment classification is permitted within our zoning code. I'm not sure council has the ability to stop such a proposal should it move forward. I am available for questions you may have. You have my number. Thanks. Very best regards, Andy Rose.
Mr. Shaboo?
I have an email here. I will not be able to attend this evening's council meeting. I'm writing you to reiterate my opinion on the newly proposed senior apartment development on the corner of Lake Shore and Andrew, and also to make a request of everyone, myself included, who will be participating in future discussion. Whether you're a Mentor on Lake resident, a member of Mentor on Lake leadership, or a prospective developer. My opinion is her opinion. Ultimately, I do not think more rental units will benefit our small community in the short, medium, or long term. Despite the early stages of planning and discussion, several cognate arguments were raised last night that merit serious consideration. brought to my attention that the city of Mentor continues to move forward with the plans for opening a restaurant at Mentor Beach Park. If this is true and the Summers Group took this into consideration, they might come to realize the potential of an appropriate sized mixed-use development. At nearly every meeting I have attended or listened to via Zoom, the subject of how cash-strapped our city is has been discussed. With this in mind, I feel it's imperative that should the Summers Group develop plans get approved, they should do so under the following criteria. Number one, no tax statements. Number two, no zoning variance. My request, it seems obvious that we will be addressing more contentious issues in the coming months and weeks. Everyone involved has put forth one or all of the following time, effort, and money, and because of that, emotions will run high. In fact, we witnessed that last night. We had everything from personal jabs to having the floor approaching the podium only to show disdain for the opinions of others. I ask that going forward, all of us make a concerted effort to be more decent and respectful to one another. Mentor Lake residents, Mentor Lake leadership, and potential business stakeholders. Kind regards, Tess Terry, 7373 Salina.
Any other correspondence tonight? Hearing none, we will go on to administrative and department head reports. Mayor and Safety Director, Mr. Eva, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson, members of council, the public here this evening. First off, I would like to let you know we had a very successful fall festival. And I want to again thank our staff and volunteers. We had a beautiful weather day and a good crowd. Also that same day, we had a visit from State Representative Dan Troy. And I was able to take Dan and a couple of his aides down to Lake Overlook Beach Park for a site visit. I showed them exactly how much land we had left before the playground would maybe hit the water, the trees that were going into the water, and he assured me that he would do potentially looking at the funding that's available for us. Fire department report for August. August 2022, there were 98 calls for service, 20 fire service calls, 78 rescue EMS calls. Of the 78 calls, 13 calls were for invalid assist. We had 1 call for an overdose requiring Narcan. Members of the fire department celebrating the service anniversary in August. Firefighter Corby, 7 years. Firefighter O'Connell, 7 years. Firefighter Sept, 6 years. Firefighter Free at the Ground, 1 year. Also, I don't know if council's seen, there was TV, also articles for our Gabe Anamia. Gabe was on vacation along with part-time. He used to work here part-time, probably still does, and he's a matter of all passionate. They were on a trip in Alaska. They ran across a lady that had broken her ankle and were able to carry her down the mountain that they were on and helped her a lot. Really proud of the 2 of these guys. And just thought I'd mention that. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Administrative Director, Mrs. Bartone, good evening.
Good evening. On tonight's agenda, resolution 15, before we get to that, it does not need to be passed tonight. I have to have it to by October 3rd, so we can pass it at the next meeting. If you'd like to wait. There is resolution 17 and ordinance 13, both relating to the SID funding. That does need to be passed tonight. It is time sensitive. All of the municipalities that are included in the second round of funding have to pass their legislation this week and next week in order to be included in the next round. This does not commit us to take those funds. It just allows us to borrow those funds if we don't receive any other funds out there. That's all I have to report.
Thank you. Law Director, Mr. Lyons, good evening.
Good evening, President. Well, Connie was giving a report, especially resolution 2022 R15. meeting. I understand. Johnson, back to the chance, good chance that Mr. Bungler may not be able to get forward. We won't be able to suspend cancel. So we do have 6 tonight. It might be prudent. to make a decision. Other than that,
Thank you. Are there any questions for the administration? Mayor Eagle?
Well, I was out handing out letters about closing Twilight to the people on Chagrin Drive and Twilight Drive. The residents on the far west end of Twilight approached me about, can we get a sign down by the intersection of Chagrin and Twilight? Saying no stopping or no parking. Apparently people go down there to watch the sunset. And at one point, one of the residents there had to leave in an emergency and she couldn't get out of her driveway. People had parked there and left their car sitting there, and she had to wait till they came back.
I did get an email on that, Mr. Morris, along with the police chief. I talked to him about that, and we have no data that he's aware of that really looks at that and says we need another sign there. I was able, if this is the same person, I did send back an email saying, if you're ever in a situation where somebody's not going to let you out of your driveway, please call us here at dispatch, and we'll send an officer down there immediately, and that will be taken care of. And that's how we left that.
So you're saying you don't want to put a sign?
No.
Any other questions for the administration? Okay. Hearing none, we will move on to board, committee, and commission reports. Special committee.
Special committee met on the 15th of August. Start time is 6. In attendance was myself, Mr. Morris, Ms. Moore. We reviewed ordinance 1242-.025. Went over it more in depth. Still working on it. Some of that was asking CT about an environmental assessment and do other cities do it? How do they do it? And then we're also going to talk to Susan and actually have her come to our next meeting to find out where a lot of her things came up with, because we have some more questions, but that would mostly go to her. So we adjourned at 7 p.m.
Council of the Whole. Council of the Whole met on Thursday, August 18th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Present were Mr. Shaboo, Mr. Morris, myself, Mr. Bittner, and Mrs. Moore. Topics included reviewing outstanding ordinance topics, including the right-of-way ordinance, golf cart inspection fees, fence permits, penalty section for 452.16, parking of trucks and other large vehicles, as well as a few other things. So we discussed the golf cart inspections, added it to the agenda for tonight's meeting. Discussed adding a penalty section for 452.16. That is also on the agenda for tonight's meeting. We reviewed changes to 1242.11, issuance of fence permits, and adding that to the agenda for tonight's meeting. The right-of-way needs further review details of what was agreed to previously by the ordinance committee and a draft of the legislation still. Rental inspections need further review and discussion at a further future meeting. And finally, the update Aqua Ohio fees ordinance that will be proposed at a future meeting. Parks and Recreation Board. Yes,
That meeting was not held due to a lack of a quorum.
thank you.
Again,
Community Development Committee.
yes, Mr. President, the Community Development met on August 25th at 7 p.m. to discuss proposals from 2 companies concerning master plans and a small discussion on the future of Global Park. Present with myself, Dave Shaboo, Desiree was absent, Rob Johnson, Vice President Kevin Bittner. There were also several residents present. The meeting started on time. I informed those present that I had reached out to several communities that the commercial real estate and the Envision Group had indicated they had done work with. The objective was to see if these communities were happy with the work done by these 2 agencies. Of the communities that I contacted for the Hannah Group, which included Mayfield Heights, North Mayfield, South Euclid, and Wickliffe, no one there seemed to have any recollection of the Hannah Group doing any work for their cities. However, in defense of the Hannah Group, all these contacts were new at their positions and yet had not seen any paperwork from the past that anything was done by them. Of the communities that I contacted concerning the Envision Group, North Royalton, Madeira, and Pickerington, they all had high comments for this group. The city manager of Pickerington even stated that he was aware of them doing a great job for Madeira. It was agreed that I should contact the Hannah Group for direct contact for South Euclid, as they kept citing that city in their presentation. It was also just suggested that we contact APA Ohio, which is the American Planning Association, for guidance. There was also a brief discussion on ideas for improvement of limit to include possible pier, pavilion, and improved parking. All of the projects will be funded by possible grants if and when they become available. Nothing could happen before the revetment along the shoreline. Concerns were raised about parking and overuse of the park. It was also suggested to have this included in the master plan for the city. There was also a brief discussion about an observation area or platform in the area known as the wetlands area that extends along Marine Parkway to Lake Shore Boulevard. This is to be looked into for more details for any real interest or available grants. The meeting adjourned at 7:42.
I do have a question. I know Ms. Bartol and I both been contacted by Hannah Commercial, and I did get an email yesterday from Envision. Are their proposals still on the table with council, or, you know, they're looking for an answer? Are they
Yes.
still? Okay.
Yes, we are still looking at our options, and
Okay.
his committee is currently evaluating whether to move forward with one of them or whether there are other ones that they wanted to review.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
Planning and Zoning Commission.
Planning and Zoning Commission, it met last night, September 12, 2022, started at 6 p.m. In attendance was Suzanne Cason, Brent Moore, Mike Sweeney, Al Busher, myself, Dave Eagle, Rob Johnson, Michelle Moore, Paul Morris, and numerous residents. First item on the agenda was 7345 Salida, requested fence variance of 8 feet because, and only 6 feet was approved to be consistent with the rest of the city and neighboring property. 7896 Sharon Drive requested a fence on the side front. A 6-foot fence was approved, and it has to be 6 feet from the sidewalk. 7790 Lake Shore Boulevard. Mr. Summers presented a 71 senior citizen apartment complex. This was a preliminary discussion. The commission approved the preliminary plans and requested more plans for further discussions at the next meeting. Lastly, a motion was approved to ask council to request the ordinance committee to review the fencing ordinance and specifically the second frontage, setbacks, vision impairment, right of way, but still allow the property owner privacy, perhaps a 6 foot from the sidewalk limit.
Are there any other boards or commissions that met related to call tonight? Hearing none, we will move on to open to the public to speak. If you would like to speak, please come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record. This is an opportunity for you to speak to council. It is not a discussion or a back and forth between council and the audience. If you have a specific topic that you need to have a discussion about, please do so either after the meeting, find either the administration or a member of council to have that discussion there. But this is, again, your opportunity to speak to council, to raise any concerns you have in the public record. Would anyone like to come and speak? Hearing none, I will close this portion of the public to speak. Legislation before council. Resolution number 2022-R-15. Please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-15. A resolution accepting the rates as determined by the Lake County Budget Commission for tax year 2022, authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the Lake County Auditor.
And as Mr. Lyons suggested, I agree that we should suspend the rules tonight because there is a very good risk that we will not have enough
I will make that
to
motion.
suspend it. Second.
Never mind.
Okay,
Oh,
so a
sorry.
motion made by
Go ahead.
Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-16, if you please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-16. A resolution ratifying the collective bargaining agreement with the part-time patrol officers and authorizing the mayor and administrative director to execute a written contract with the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association and declaring an emergency.
Discussion. Is there any motion? Hearing none, this will go on second reading. Resolution number 2022-R-17, if you could please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-17. A resolution declaring it necessary and determining to proceed with acquiring, constructing, installing, equipping, improving, maintaining, and repairing improvements necessary for making improvements to abate erosion along properties within the city included within the Lake Community Shoreline Special Improvement District, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Discussion.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
this part-time, this one is the one that you want to pass tonight or not?
Yes,
Okay, and this is to do what?
this allows us to join in the second round of funding
Okay,
for us and anyone else who had originally applied, made it, and didn't make the cut. As of right now, we are the only ones in that application round.
Motion to suspend made by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner, Mrs. Thompson. Aye. Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Shaboo for passage. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Ordinance number 2022-0-12. Please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-12. An ordinance levying liens for expenses incurred for lawn maintenance and or culvert repairs.
Any questions or discussion on this?
How many repeat offenders are on this list?
Oh,
Make a
Any
motion to pass it,
in
I'll
foreclosure?
second
this? Sorry.
that's my,
or a suspension of the rules. I'm
So
sorry.
there's a motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Morris,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Motion to approve by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Ordinance number 2022-0-13, if you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-13. An ordinance levying special assessments for acquiring, constructing, installing, equipping, improving, maintaining, and repairing improvements necessary for making improvements to abate erosion along properties within the city included within the Lake Communities Shoreline Special Improvement District, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Any questions or discussion on this?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Any discussion?
It makes a comment about levying special assessments for acquiring and all this stuff. What special assessments are we talking about?
if we do move forward and need to borrow the money, that special assessment will go on to the property taxes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Roll call, please. Suspending the rules.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Seconded.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Ordinance number 2022-0-14. Would you please read it by its title?
Ordinance number 2022-0-14. An ordinance amending codified ordinance 1242.11, issuance of fence permits.
Any discussion on this? Is there any motion on this? Hearing none, this will go on second reading. Ordinance number 2022-0-15, if you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-15. An ordinance amending codified ordinance 434.10, operation of golf carts on city roadways, to add in paragraph G to allow for fees for inspection of golf carts and declaring an emergency.
Any questions or discussion on this one?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I did find out that our fees that we're charging are way under what other communities do. I
I
do know,
tried to tell you that.
yeah, I know. I tried to bring it up too. I do know that Geneva charges $100 a cart, and they only do residence carts. So I haven't looked at other communities yet that done inspect carts, but there aren't that many. of them. Just come.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask, did the police chief have any input on?
Yes, he's the one that brought it
Okay,
to,
yeah,
brought
because,
it up
you
to
know,
us.
it's
Yeah,
probably an hour or so.
yeah, he said it was a half hour.
Got, okay,
Yeah.
okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, and that's how we came up with the rates based on
Gotcha.
salary.
Yeah.
Just so there was no extra.
All right, as long as he gave us,
Extra.
yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Any other questions or comments on this? Any motion on this?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend by Mrs. Thompson,
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by-
Recoup some of this money back.
Mrs. Moore. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson for passage, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Ordinance number 2022-0-16, if you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-16. An ordinance amending codified ordinance 452.16, parking of trucks and other large vehicles, and 452.99 penalty.
Any questions or discussion on this?
Is there a size on the campers that are? But they have to be 20 feet to drive, that's basically it.
Is there any motion? Hearing none, this will go on second reading. Ordinance number 2022-0-17, if you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-17. An ordinance amending codified ordinance 618.19 D6, definition of nuisance health risk animals.
Okay, and this one we have added in Canada geese at the request of the library. We spent a lot of money trying to keep the geese away from their property, and people have been feeding the geese, so that's why we have been asked to add this in as a additional nuisance animal to the ordinance. Any questions or discussion on this?
It says here that if you are feeding any of these animals or anything, that there are penalties. I don't think I've really, has that been happening? Like the certain one on Goldenrod that's been feeding those feral cats? We've gone out and talked to her.
Is the feral cats on that nuisance list?
Yes.
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 It is, okay. They have been talked to, and my understanding, one of the neighbors is trying to assist in getting those placed somewhere at this point.
It's a huge problem.
Yes, and they are.
Any other questions or discussion on this? Any motion on this?
Motion to suspend.
Motion made by Mr. Morris to suspend,
Seconded.
seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Is there a motion to approve?
So made.
Made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson. Mrs. Moore. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Old business. Is there any old business tonight? Other than the laundry list of ordinances we still have to go through. Hearing none. Is there any new business tonight? Hearing none. We'll move on to open to the public to speak. John, if you would like to speak, please come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record. This is again your opportunity to speak to council. It is not a back and forth discussion.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't hear you.
7616
And your
Salida,
name?
Kathy Lynn, L-I-N-N. I don't have anything for it, it's just that I'm newer at this, and I don't know what it means. And again, a lot of these ordinances, is that indicative of this is something we need to look at and not let it put on hold for another meeting or something?
So the terminology declaring an emergency allows it to take effect immediately upon signage by the mayor, rather than having to wait 30 days after passing by council.
That's all I need to know.
You're welcome. And thank you for the question, because that's a good question. Anyone else?
Ma'am, I
My
can't.
question is regarding the golf
Can
carts.
you repeat your name again a little louder? She's having trouble hearing you over the.
Susan Schick. The golf carts, are you legally allowed to drive golf carts on the streets and not on the lake?
Yes,
As long as
Without a doubt,
if they're inspected and approved.
With the license plate.
without a doubt. Because I went to get a license plate and they wouldn't give me one. They said it wasn't allowed.
It has to meet certain criteria.
No, so when was at, not to interrupt, the license bureau and someone else overheard the sheriff or someone who was in there saying, no, Monroe Lake doesn't allow them. Yeah, and we heard that third from another resident.
But they were adamant, they were like, we
Right.
won't give you, you can't drive down the street. And I'm like, okay, well, I just bought this brand new golf cart. What's the matter? So that's not true. They told me, I thought they're wrong.
They,
And at the lesson, and at the time.
oh, it wasn't
No, it
somebody.
wasn't us.
Right.
No, I mean, like, I did everything I was supposed to do. I had everything, I had the police taking care of, proving everything.
So question, you had your inspection with
Yes.
you and everything.
Yes.
So their only job is to give you a plate when that happens. It's not their job
It
to
doesn't
tell you
hurt
where.
to tell them that.
What's that?
She's stuck in the middle.
I know,
And
that's,
I'm sure that that's what she was probably saying, like, why do you even want this if you can't drive it there?
okay, so it's kind of,
Yeah, but she's right.
Sorry.
she's wrong.
So she was trying to save me the aggravation and money of doing all that.
Would like the ordinance number.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight? Hearing none, we will close this portion and open to the public to speak. Announcements and settings of meetings.
Special committee, I'm gonna talk to Susan before, because I want her there, this line, finish that up. At that ordinance, or at that meeting, we'll discuss the 1242, the C, section C2, C3. And also, we're going to revisit we discussed before adding the elimination of all box stores. Business 1, business 2.
Should we need to do that
anyhow, do a second meeting with Susan.
Don't know if
Get
that
that
was
other-
gonna take us as long, so I'm kind of thinking. Do them together. I'll talk to her. I'll get a hold
Because it would be nice to get that on the books sooner than later.
of her. We can.
Just a thought.
Just a question. The Susan that you're referring to is,
This case,
Who's Casey?
oh, okay, Suzanne.
Suzanne, sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Suzanne. I apologize.
No, no, you're.
You guys want to work on that next Tuesday?
I'm on top,
Out of town. From until?
Monday through Thursday.
Monday, the 26th. Is that what you said?
the 19th, I think.
Thursday. This day. 2 days.
Sure.
No,
I
it's just
can't
reading.
leave.
Okay. You can't make it.
Yeah, the next week.
Yeah, yeah.
22nd. No, she won't.
She's out of town.
You're out of
That
town.
week's out.
I'll be back on Thursday.
So it's gonna be after next council.
Okay.
Okay.
Instead of next, 'cause I wanna
Do
talk
the
about-
Monday before council.
I wanna talk
Any other meetings? Since we haven't scheduled any yet.
Ordinance,
Ordinance committee.
the 21st and the 29th is available for the room, for the hall. It's all-
It's the old standing date that they have.
Yes. The 21st. 29th.
29th's fine with me.
The Thursday. '29th, 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
And do you guys know what you're going over?
They're gonna go over the right of way and rental
That's it.
inspections and whatever else they put up.
Right-of-way inspections, fences.
I'd like to make a suggestion. I know a lot of communities are adopting ordinances against basically panhandling, but it's referred to as something else. So I think East Lake's in the process of doing theirs. And I have witnessed people doing that up here at Eccles Corners for the last couple of weeks.
I think we just had that ordinance still. We appealed it just, I mean, within the last 5 years.
Right, because it was illegal.
These other ones are, just saying we should look at it.
I guess that would be referred to the law director to
Yes.
determine what's legal and illegal for us to do.
Well, I'd like to look and see what other communities are doing because they're passing ordinances concerning.
Yeah, that's illegal on them, though. I would rather
Yeah.
agree with Mr. Johnson.
So we will refer that to the law director to
Okay.
report back on
Yes.
that topic. So we haven't really given him anything recently either.
I disagree.
Any other meetings?
Community development.
Community development.
Thursdays and Fridays are better for me.
Okay. Thursdays and Fridays are better for her.
Right.
Let's stay away from Fridays. Can we do the 29th after our ordinance meeting?
Okay.
You want to do it at 8 o'clock?
Yeah, it's not gonna take long.
Okay.
September 29th. What time?
8 o'clock.
What are you covering?
We're gonna cover up the, finish this, review of the Hannah Group and discuss any proposals from anything that the APA would suggest to us.
What time is your ordinance?
7.
7.
Yeah.
The only last one is planning and zoning, but that's not till October third.
Is that all? Anybody else? Hearing none, the next regular agenda meeting will be Thursday, September 22nd at 6 PM. The next regular meeting of council will be Tuesday, September 27th at 7 PM. Your motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
By Mr. Morris, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye, this meeting is adjourned.